San Francisco, 2016. The man behind the counter didn't recognize the customer walking through the door. Why would he? The customer was one of the most famous rock stars on earth, and the man behind the counter had spent the last 38 years being forgotten. He worked minimum wage, repaired old speakers, helped customers who had no idea who he once was. But decades earlier, this same man had traveled the world with Black Sabbath. Then life got in the way. His mother became ill. He left the music industry and slowly disappeared from it. On this ordinary afternoon, he looked up from his work and froze. Standing in front of him was Ozzy Osbourne, not on a stage, not on television, not in a magazine, right there in his store. And before the man could say a word, Ozzy smiled and said, "Liam Donovan, I haven't seen you since 1978. The room went silent, because Liam had spent almost 4 decades believing Black Sabbath had forgotten him. But Ozzy hadn't. Not even close. Ozzy walked over, pulled up a chair, and sat down. Then he asked a question Liam never expected to hear. "Tell me what happened to you." And that's when a story that began nearly 40 years earlier finally came back to life. Ozzy sat quietly as Liam tried to process what was happening. For a moment, neither man knew where to begin. 38 years. That was the last time they had seen each other. Finally, Ozzy broke the silence. "You vanished, mate. One day you were there, then you were gone." Liam smiled sadly. He had heard that question before, but never from Ozzy Osbourne, never from someone who had actually been there. He leaned back in his chair and slowly began to explain. Back in the late 1970s, Liam was living the dream. Night after night, he helped prepare Black Sabbath shows. While thousands of fans filled arenas, Liam worked behind the scenes making sure every speaker, every microphone, and every cable worked perfectly. The hours were exhausting. The pressure was intense, but he loved it. He felt like he belonged. Then one phone call changed everything. His mother had become seriously ill. The doctors weren't sure how much time she had left. Suddenly, touring the world didn't seem important anymore. Without hesitation, Liam made a decision. He packed his bags, left the tour, and returned home. At first, he thought it would only be temporary. A few months, maybe a year. Then he would come back. But life had other plans. His mother's condition worsened. The months became years. The years became decades. And while Black Sabbath continued making history, Liam watched from a distance. The opportunities stopped coming. The phone stopped ringing. New engineers took his place. The industry moved on. And eventually, so did everyone else. Or so he thought. As Liam finished speaking, Ozzy stared at the floor. Because he knew something Liam didn't. The band may have moved forward, but some memories never left. And one memory, in particular, was about to change everything. Liam looked at Ozzy, confused. "What do you mean?" Ozzy smiled. For the first time since entering the store, he wasn't looking at the man sitting in front of him. He was looking into the past. Back to 1977. Back to a night Liam had completely forgotten. Back then, Black Sabbath was constantly on the road. Long flights, long drives, late night shows. The schedule was relentless. One night in Liverpool, after a particularly exhausting concert, Ozzy wasn't feeling well. He was exhausted. His throat was burning. His voice was almost gone. Most of the crew had already gone to sleep. The venue was nearly empty. Everyone wanted rest. Everyone except one person, Liam. While the rest of the building grew quiet, Liam noticed Ozzy struggling. He didn't ask for attention. He didn't expect recognition. He simply disappeared for a few minutes and came back carrying a mug. Honey and lemon. A simple drink. Nothing expensive. Nothing remarkable. Just a small act of kindness. Ozzy accepted it, thanked him, and the night moved on. To Liam, it was a moment so small it wasn't worth remembering. But Ozzy never forgot it. Now, nearly 40 years later, Ozzy looked him straight in the eyes. "You probably don't remember that night, do you?" Liam shook his head. Ozzy laughed softly. "I do." The room fell silent, because Liam had spent decades believing he had left no mark on the people around him. Yet one of the biggest rock stars in the world had carried that memory for almost 40 years. And Ozzy wasn't finished. There was a reason he had remembered. And there was a reason he had walked into that store and stayed. What he said next would leave Liam speechless. Liam didn't speak. He just stared at Ozzy. Because those words didn't make sense. "Now it's my turn." Turn for what? Before he could ask, Ozzy leaned back in his chair and looked around the small shop. Speakers stacked in corners. Old equipment on the shelves. A life built around fixing what the world had thrown away. Then Ozzy nodded slowly, like something had fully clicked in his mind. Not just recognition. Respect. "You were always there," Ozzy said quietly. "Every show, every country, every mess we got into backstage. You were one of the ones holding it together. Liam shook his head. I was just doing my job. Ozzy smiled. That's what you think. Silence filled the room again. Outside, people walked past the store like nothing unusual was happening. But inside, two timelines were colliding. Then Ozzy stood up. Not dramatically. Not like a rock star. Just a man. He walked over to one of the old speakers in the shop and tapped it lightly. You still love this, don't you? Liam hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I never stopped. Ozzy turned back, and this time his voice was different. Calm, certain. Then why are you here? Working like you don't matter. That question hit harder than anything else. Liam didn't answer. Because there was no simple answer. Just life, just survival, just time passing without permission. Ozzy walked back and sat down again. Then he said something that changed the entire energy in the room. You didn't disappear, Liam. The industry did that to you. Liam looked down. For the first time, he didn't argue, because part of him knew it was true. Nervous. Not because of fame, not because of shock, but because something about Ozzy's tone felt different now. Calmer, heavier, real. Why? Liam asked quietly. Ozzy didn't answer immediately. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out nothing important, just a small folded piece of paper, old, worn, kept for years. He placed it on the counter. Liam didn't touch it yet. Ozzy spoke first. Because I never forgot you. A pause. Then he continued. Not the tours, not the crowds, not the chaos. He tapped the paper lightly. You. Liam slowly unfolded it. Inside was an old backstage note. A list of crew names. Faded ink. Almost invisible with time. But Liam's name was still there. He froze. Ozzy watched him carefully. People think we remember only the big moments, Ozzy said. But I remember the ones who made the big moments possible. Liam swallowed hard. Because no one had ever said that to him. Not in 38 years. Not once. He thought about everything. The nights he stayed awake fixing sound issues. The shows he made possible without credit. The life he quietly walked away from. And now this. Recognition. Not from an industry, but from a person. Ozzy stood up again and walked slowly toward him. Then he said something simple. Something final. You didn't just work for Black Sabbath. You were part of it. Liam's eyes filled. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Because for decades, he had believed he was forgotten. Now he was realizing something else entirely. He had just been waiting for the right person to remember. Liam didn't understand what Ozzy meant. Fix what time broke, he repeated softly. Ozzy nodded. Then he looked around the small shop again. At the repaired speakers, the old equipment, the quiet life Liam had built from scraps of what was left. And he shook his head slightly, not in disappointment, but in realization. You were never supposed to end up here, Ozzy said. Liam looked away. Life doesn't always care what we're supposed to be. Ozzy smiled faintly. No, but people still can. A long silence followed. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed. People talked. Phones rang. But inside the shop, something irreversible was happening. Not fame, not nostalgia. Something rarer. Closure. Ozzy stepped closer. Listen to me, Liam. Liam looked up. You didn't lose the music industry. You gave it your time. And it moved on without thanking you. He paused, then added, that's not the same as being forgotten. Liam's eyes dropped again. For years, he believed he had been erased. But now he was hearing something different. Acknowledgement, respect, memory. Ozzy reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. Not like a superstar, like an old friend. In 1977, you made me honey and lemon at 3 in the morning when I was done. A small smile. Now I'm here, because I remember the people who were there when it mattered. Liam finally broke. Not loudly, just quietly. All the years, all the silence, all the weight of being invisible. It came out in one breath. Ozzy didn't interrupt. He just stayed there, letting it happen. Because sometimes the biggest gift isn't money. It's being seen. After a while, Liam wiped his face and laughed softly through tears. I thought no one cared. Ozzy shook his head. Wrong. He stepped back toward the door. Before leaving, he turned one last time. Come on. Let's get you back where you belong. And just like that, the man who had been forgotten for almost 40 years walked out of the shop with Ozzy Osbourne, not as a legend, not as a crew member, but as someone finally remembered.